He was just a boy when he became a legend. A drifter by 15, a killer by 17, and by 21, he was the most hunted man in America. Some called him a monster, others, a hero. History remembers him as Billy the Kid, but behind the myths lies a story few truly know. His name has echoed through the canyons of American history for over a century. A name that conjures images of smoking revolvers, daring escapes, and a reckless young outlaw riding headlong into destiny. But the truth of who Billy the Kid really was is far more complex than the legends left behind. Born into poverty, forged by violence, and betrayed by the very system that claimed to uphold justice. This is not the Hollywood version of the kid. This is the real story of a boy abandoned by the world, and the legend he became before his life was cut short. Some say he died with a bullet to the heart. Others believe he rode off into the unknown. But one thing is certain: his story never died. Long before he was known as Billy the Kid, he was just another forgotten child of America's underbelly. Born Henry McCarty, likely in 1859, in the teeming slums of New York City, his life began in hardship. His father vanished early. His mother struggled to keep her boys fed, and the streets offered no kindness to the poor. Like so many families trapped in the grip of poverty, the McCartys went west in search of something better. But the frontier was no land of promise. It was a place where dreams died in the dust, and the weak were left behind. Catherine McCarty, already sick with tuberculosis, moved her boys through Kansas and Colorado, finally settling in Silver City, New Mexico. By then, her health was failing fast. In September of 1874, when Henry was just 15, his mother breathed her last. Her death left him alone in a harsh and lawless land with no father, no family, and no future. Orphaned and destitute, he did what so many forgotten boys were forced to do. He learned to survive any way he could. He swept floors in saloons, washed dishes in grimy kitchens, and slept in abandoned shacks. But hunger has a way of driving even the most innocent toward desperation. One day, caught stealing food, young Henry was thrown into jail, and it was there, in the suffocating walls of a Silver City cell, that he made his first escape. Crawling through a narrow chimney, he slipped out into the night and never looked back. From that moment on, the law was no longer a force to protect him. It was an enemy, to be outrun. The boy without a home, without a name, had begun his journey toward legend. Before long, the name Henry McCarty would disappear, and in its place, the West would come to know William H. Bonney, the outlaw history would remember as Billy the Kid. With no home to return to and no future promised, the boy who called himself William H. Bonney drifted into the Arizona Territory. The vast and lawless West had no shortage of men living by the gun, and soon, Billy found himself among them. It wasn't long before his path crossed with violence. In August of 1877, just 17 years old, Billy found himself in a deadly confrontation with a blacksmith named Frank Windy Cahill. Accounts differ on who started it. Some say Cahill, a known bully, had been tormenting the wiry young drifter for months. Others say Billy pulled the gun first. But when the smoke cleared, Cahill lay dying, and Billy the Kid was now a wanted man. With blood on his hands and a bounty on his head, Billy rode hard and fast back into New Mexico. But fate wasn't finished with him yet. Ahead lay the conflict that would shape his legend, the brutal and bloody Lincoln County War. At the heart of it all was greed. Lincoln County was ruled by a ruthless monopoly, the Murphy-Dolan faction. They controlled the banks, the stores, the law, and the courts. Anyone who stood against them faced ruin, or worse. But a challenger appeared in the form of John Tunstall, a young English rancher determined to break their stranglehold on the region's economy. Tunstall's stand against corruption ended with a bullet. Ambushed and murdered by men loyal to Murphy and Dolan, his death sent shockwaves through the territory. And for Billy the Kid, it was a turning point. Tunstall had offered him honest work, a chance at a different life, and now that hope was buried in a shallow grave. From that moment forward, Billy swore vengeance. He joined the regulators, a band of vigilantes determined to bring Tunstall's killers to justice. But in the unforgiving language of the frontier, justice often meant revenge. The Lincoln County War raged across the desert. Ambushes, skirmishes, and assassinations turned the quiet New Mexico landscape into a battlefield. And through it all rode Billy the Kid, fast with his guns and fearless in the face of death. But this wasn't the story the newspapers told. In their pages, Billy became the face of lawlessness itself, a ruthless killer with no conscience. They gave him a new title, the Kid, and soon, that name would become infamous across the nation. With every gunfight and every escape, the legend grew. But it wasn't just bullets building Billy the Kid's reputation. It was the booming business of sensational headlines. In a land starved for heroes and villains, newspapers found gold in his story, and they wasted no time turning a young drifter into a mythical outlaw. One headline claimed he had killed 21 men, one for every year of his life. Another called him the most dangerous man in the West. And soon, that number, 21, became legend. A simple, bloody arithmetic that was easy to sell and hard to disprove. But the truth, like most legends, is far more complicated. Historians have spent over a century combing through records, testimonies, and court documents. And the real count? It isn't 21. It isn't even close. By the harsh light of history, Billy the Kid's confirmed kills likely fall between 4 and 9, and many of those deaths didn't happen in cold blood. They happened in the chaos of war, in gunfights he didn't start, and in moments of survival where it was kill or be killed. His first confirmed killing was Frank "Windy" Cahill. In 1877, it was likely self-defense. In the Lincoln County War, several killings were attributed to him during armed conflict, including the ambush of Sheriff William Brady. During the courthouse escape in April of 1881 were his most famous killings. Deputies James Bell and Bob Ollinger. That escape sealed his fate as a legend. Chained and awaiting execution, Billy overpowered a guard, shot his way to freedom, and rode out of town as if fate itself had handed him another chance at life. 2 men lay dead in his wake, but the boy who had once climbed through a chimney to escape the law was free again. Yet for all the blood spilled, the image of Billy the Kid as a heartless killer never quite fit. Those who knew him remembered a different young man, charming, playful, fluent in Spanish, a dancer, a singer, quick to laugh and slow to anger, unless cornered. And though his hands were stained with blood, they were also the hands of a boy who had never truly been given a chance. History remembers the killers, but it rarely asks why they picked up a gun in the first place. By the spring of 1881, Billy the Kid was running out of places to hide, hunted by lawmen and bounty hunters alike. His face, plastered across wanted posters from Santa Fe to El Paso, the Kid had become a living legend and a marked man. The reward was a fortune in a time when most men earned $1 a day, and it was more than enough incentive for his old friend turned pursuer, Sheriff Pat Garrett, to hunt him down. They had once shared drinks, stories, and the uneasy camaraderie of men who understood the brutal code of the frontier. But politics demanded a trophy, and Garrett was determined to deliver it. One last time, Billy the Kid vanished into the New Mexico desert, leaving behind only smoke, blood, and legend. But freedom, like everything else in his life, would be short-lived. On the night of July 14th, 1881, in the dusty village of Fort Sumner, fate caught up with Billy the Kid. He slipped into the home of a friend, unaware that Pat Garrett lay in wait. In the darkness, a single gunshot cracked through the silence, and with that, the legend came to an end. Billy the Kid was just 21 years old, a boy who never saw manhood, a life measured in gunfights and newspaper lies. And though the body was buried, the story had only just begun. The official story ends here, in the dust and silence of Fort Sumner. Pat Garrett pulled the trigger. Billy the Kid fell. History, it seemed, had closed the final chapter. But legends are not buried so easily. Almost 70 years after that fateful night, a man stepped forward from the shadows of history. His name was Brushy Bill Roberts, a weathered cowboy from Hico, Texas. And with trembling hands and a voice cracked by time, he made a claim that shocked the nation. He was Billy the Kid, alive and seeking the pardon he had been promised all those years ago. Roberts told his story with unsettling detail, memories of people and events only Billy should have known. He bore scars that matched wounds Billy was said to have received, and he spoke of that night in Fort Sumner, not as a man reading from a history book, but as someone who had lived it and walked away under the cover of darkness. But the state of New Mexico wasn't interested in reopening the past. Officials denied his claim, refused his request for a pardon, and turned him away. Just weeks later, Brushy Bill Roberts collapsed and died under the scorching Texas sun, taking his final secrets to the grave. To this day, the grave in Fort Sumner remains closed. No DNA tests, no exhumations, no final answers, and so the question lingers like a ghost on the desert wind. Did Billy the Kid really die that night, or did the boy outlaw outwit death one last time and simply disappear into the vast emptiness of the American West? Perhaps that's the way the story was always meant to end, not with a body in a grave, but with a legend riding forever into the sunset, free and untamed, just as he lived. In the end, Billy the Kid was more than a man. He was a symbol of freedom in a world tightening its grip, a symbol of defiance in the face of corruption, and perhaps most of all, a reminder of what happens when a society leaves its lost boys to fend for themselves in the dust. Some will say he was nothing but a killer. Others will argue he was a victim of the times. But the truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. Billy was not born a villain. He was shaped by the harsh hands of poverty, violence, and a system that offered no mercy to the forgotten. They say legends never die, and perhaps that's why, more than a century later, the kid still rides, just beyond the edge of history, forever young, forever free. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and what would help this channel the most, check out some more of our videos. Thanks for watching.